Welcome back to part 2 of my lecture series on the foundations of bioethics. Part 2 of this series focuses on primary ethical theories relevant to bioethics. For each ethical theory, I will begin with an overview of the theory, discuss the individuals or groups who are instrumental in developing the theory, explain how the theory responds to the three big questions of ultimate reality, human nature, and the role of God in ethics. I will end with a summary of the main points of the theory, along with what are generally considered the positive aspects of the theory and the limitations that the theory presents. Remember, all ethical theories that we are discussing in this course are still applied in practice today because they all contain a nugget of truth. However, all of these theories fall short of being normative for one reason or another. As you go through the theories, I encourage you to consider for yourself, what nuggets of truth do you take from the theory, and where does the theory fall short for you? In this lecture, we will look at secular natural law ethics. Similar to religious natural law ethics, secular natural law ethics is a theory grounded in the concept that truth can be found through observing nature. However, unlike religious natural law ethics, secular natural law holds that the source of this truth is not God, but rather science and reason. Following this lecture, you should be able to summarize the foundational components of secular natural law ethics, differentiate between legal and moral rights, explain the social contract theory, describe how secular law ethics answers the questions of ultimate reality, human nature, and God's role in ethics, and finally identify two positive aspects and two potential problems with secular natural law ethics. When we talked about religious natural law, we talked about nature and law and how together that brought about natural law. In secular natural law, we're going to take on a different focus, and we're going to begin with rules. Rules are what would a rational human do naturally. So rules are determined by looking at human conduct and what is the natural response of a rational human being, which therefore rules lead us to the individual. Remember, secular natural law was removing God from the equation. So the source of rules did not come from God, but rather comes from individual humans as being the primary rule makers. And as individual humans, the emphasis was autonomy or personal freedoms. Therefore, under secular natural law, the government should play a minimal role in rule development because, again, your rules are based on your autonomy and your freedom as an individual. And the purpose of the government was to be a protective source for people. And we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go through this theory. When you think of secular natural law, the most common philosopher that is associated with this theory is the English philosopher John Locke. Locke was an Enlightenment philosopher and an intimate of Isaac Newton. Locke followed the works of Newton and therefore wanted to base his ethics not on God, but on science and on physics. And so Locke emphasized this idea of individual rights and individual autonomy with a limited government. This philosophy was not grounded in God, but rather grounded in man in alignment with Enlightenment thinking. Locke discussed his ideal ethical political order where power should be limited, divided, and shared amongst individuals. Furthermore, power should be peacefully relinquished from one individual to the next, and many religions should be encouraged and allowed to flourish. And if you think back to the medieval period, the Catholic Church was the primary religion of that time. During the Enlightenment, when the focus was taken off of God, Locke was really pushing for not being so focused on one right religion. And Locke viewed that individuals must be protected ethically from the government and from each other. If you recall from the previous slide, the role of government was very minimal. The role of government was to protect people. Basically, under secular natural law, what you viewed as right and the rules you created to govern yourself were ethical up until the point that they negatively impacted somebody else. So as long as what you were doing and you were deeming ethical was not having a negative impact on another individual, you could continue to do that. Once your actions had a negative or harmful impact on others, that was then when your autonomy needed to end. Because under secular natural law, similar to under Kantian ethics, humans were not to be treated as a means to an end. A key component of understanding secular natural law ethics is understanding rights. We have natural rights, according to secular natural law ethics. These are the rights that flow from the laws of nature and are often defined as life, liberty, and prosperity. These natural rights are an entitlement for all human beings. Beyond natural rights, we also have legal rights and moral rights. Legal rights are very easily defined as the rights that are supported by the legal system. Moral rights are what are used to uphold these natural rights of life, liberty, and prosperity. So moral rights are things such as the right to life, or it would be immoral to kill somebody. It would be immoral to take away the autonomy of another individual, to limit their prosperity or their liberty. And moral rights belong to all human beings for no purpose other than you are a human being, and therefore your natural rights need to morally be protected. Social contract theory is an essential component of secular natural law ethics. Social contract theory is based on the idea that people create governments to promote their own basic rights and their own basic well-being. Thus, the role of the government is to help ensure that your rights are maintained and are not being infringed upon. In other words, the purpose of the government is to protect and to promote individual autonomy and individual freedom, not to bog people down with a lot of specific rules and regulations. So there are two political ideas that flow from social contract theory. The first is that governments are formed by the people so that the rights of the people can be secured more efficiently than nature can secure these rights. So therefore, the laws that are created by the government are in place specifically to promote individual autonomy. The second idea is that when and if a government fails, the people have this right to dissolve the government and form a new government, and this should be done peacefully. And this relates back to the beliefs of John Locke and the peaceful relinquishment of power. A good example of a social contract is the United States Constitution. If you read the Constitution in detail, the rules and regulations in the Constitution are not specific. They are very general, they are very vague, they are very brief, and most of them are really focused on protecting the rights of the individual. If you look at the Bill of Rights, it is again protecting the autonomy of the individual. So social contract theory really views the government as a means to promote individual autonomy. According to secular natural law ethics, ultimate reality, or the source of truth, comes from observing nature and understanding science. Similar to religious natural law, secular natural law is grounded in the unity of the universe. However, in contrast to religious natural law, under secular natural law, instead of God being the source of truth, it is the discoverable physical, biological, and behavioral laws of science that produce truth. Human nature has to do with individual autonomy and this idea that that which you as an individual deem to be rational is good and right, up unto the extent that what you deem to be good and right is not treating another human as a means to an end. If you are treating somebody else as a means to an end, then whether you deem the act good and rational or not, it is overall not good or rational. Secular natural law has no room for God, and God does not have a role in this ethical theory. Secular natural law is focused completely on man. While some of the other theories that we discussed did not include God but left room for God, secular natural law theorists make very clear that there is no room for God in ethics, and actually go so far as to suggest that messianic faith is destructive and goes against individual autonomy and rationality. Secular natural law is grounded in rights and autonomy. There are natural rights, moral rights, and legal rights. Natural rights are the rights that all humans are entitled to simply for being human. They are often described as life, liberty, and prosperity. Moral rights stem from the natural rights and also apply to all humans. Moral rights are a way of upholding and maintaining these natural rights. Legal rights are supported by the legal system. The social contract theory is an essential component of secular natural law ethics and indicates that governments protect the rights of the individual, and governments should be peacefully relinquished if needed if they are no longer serving the purpose of protecting the autonomy of the people. Secular natural law is very focused on the individuals. Individuals are autonomous beings who make their own rules for themselves. Therefore, what is ethical is what you as an autonomous being believe to be rational and what the rules that you rationally create for yourself. Remember, the extent of this is to the extent that you are not using another person as a means to an end. In our next lecture, we will discuss our final theory for this part of the series, virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is a theory grounded in the fact that doing good is not enough. To be ethical, you must also be good.